I'm back on the Murray River, telling the story of my 2,500 kilometre descent by canoe that I completed 20 years ago. I've come back to film and write and think about the importance of the river and paddling in my life. I've already paddled to 800 kilometres down from the highest mountain in Australia in my old green canoe, as far as the inland Port of Echuca. And on a good day, just drop into a rhythm paddling. Body just gets in harmony with the flow of the river, and the landscape, and the exercise and skill of paddling. Every now and again you feel like you can paddle all day. I paddled the next 600 kilometres of the river from Echuca to Robinvale in my K1 racing kayak. It's much faster and tippier, but it gave me a new experience and some surprising insights into life on the river. But let's check out the Port of Echuca first. So I'm paddling down to the old inland Port of Echuca, the famous Echuca Wharf with its 3 levels so it could be accessed, different river levels. It's a berthing place for the old steamboats. It's a famous part of the river where produce would have been shipped overland to here and then taken all the way down to Goolwa in South Australia. And even though they couldn't get it out through the river mouth, they had to take it by horse-drawn carriage along a railway to Port Elliot, another old stomping ground of mine where we used to holiday in summer. But probably one of the most important towns on the river, Port of Echuca. Certainly in the colonial days, when river trade was king back in the day. But just a magic scene. Well, I haven't paddled my K1 racing kayak for several years. I used to do a lot of flatwater training on it and a few races. It was the kayak that I took on the second leg of my Murray voyage. And I probably went from having 30 kilos of gear to 13 kilos of gear. And I just wanted to experience the river in a different sort of way. And when you're paddling, you're experiencing the river or whatever water body you're paddling through the technology of your craft. Your craft and your blade. Your kayak and your paddle, or your canoe and your paddle. I wonder if I can still paddle the old K1 all these years later. So I've brought it out to my local lake for a paddle and to think about that part of the Murray River journey. Even just that little ripple is enough to throw you off balance. And you tend to get your body back to lower your centre of gravity, but you've got to do the opposite. You've got to get right up and over, leaning forwards, and get into the rhythm of your stroke. And you can't be stationary. It's like a bike. Balance comes with movement. Got to try and have the confidence to get up and forward and rely upon the rhythm of the stroke. A bit of deeper water here. You're balancing on a knife blade. It was that tippy. In fact, when I started to paddle the K1, I just had to look straight ahead down the bow of the kayak. so that I wouldn't tip over. If I turned my head to the side, I'd instantly get that little movement of weight and be in danger of tipping over. So I paddled, just clocking up mile after mile and just looking dead straight ahead. And that sort of paddling is just such a discipline. You know, your technique has to be so refined. And I guess I really enjoyed that about that aspect of the trip. Well, just slightly better. One of the big problems that I had on the Murray, I'd get wake boats and jet boats constantly coming past, constantly kicking up large waves, some of them even trying to knock me out, and I'd have to anticipate it and turn my boat so I was paddling directly into the waves. Otherwise they'd tip me over. I just felt like a complete novice again, and that's a really interesting lesson for a teacher or instructor to go through that process. Each time in my paddling life that I've tried something new, either a new craft or a new level of challenge or a new environment, that you've got to go through that process again of learning and building up skill and knowledge through just miles and miles and miles of kayak travel or canoe travel. Ironically, it gave me an incredible feel for the water because I was balanced on such a fine point. I could feel every ripple in the water's surface and every current, and I could feel water moving off clay banks under the water. And I think it was ironic, but it gave me a real feel for what the old riverboat captains knew about the river. Every sandbank under the water and where the deep channel flowed and what happened on the edges of those channels and where the eddy lines were. And this is in not a fast-flowing whitewater river where those things are quite distinct, but on a great big wide meandering river like the Murray. As soon as I was in the K1, I could feel all of that because my boat would shift under me and my balance would just have to shift and counteract it to stay upright. And it wasn't the easiest 600 kilometres, but it taught me a lot about the river. I was travelling so light that I didn't even take a camera, just my A5 Spire-X notebook to keep my daily journal entries and to jot down a few poems along the way. Day 25. Long Bend, 58 kilometres today. Longish day including a portage past the Turrumbary Weir. Clear skies all day, a light southerly blowing. Started paddling at 7 after getting up at 6, just on sunrise. In really hot weather, I'll have to be away earlier. No jet boats in the Gunbower forest below the weir. Right shoulder and wrist okay, lower back very tired. After the weekend roar, the shiny boats, the rooster tails and fumes are gone. Past the Turrumbary Weir, a ribbon of brown water falling, past the new staircase the fish must climb, solving the puzzle one room at a time, they dart beneath a white-faced heron, who has mastered the new trick already. Then, with a flick of their tail fin, they find the bed of the old river. There's no chuff-chuff paddle wheeler. It's long been corralled into the museum that plays yesterday, within easy range of the tourist's megapixel attention. There's no creak, chink of harness and chain, only a faint echo of the bullock teamster and his cracking whip that leans the beasts against their breeching. They're all gone. Now the old log buggy rests on a green lawn, the teamster in his grave beyond the edge of town, and the bullock's bones lie scattered in the forest. Into the gun bower, a midday sun, and even the chattering white-winged choughs fall quiet. So there's only me and the southerly, changing its tone in the trees. No clouds yet ribbing a vast blue sky. Day 28. 72 kilometres today. Paddling at about 8.5 kilometres an hour. Time between the 50-60 kilometre mark for the day. Kept on trying to find a place to camp, or at least to get out of the boat. Not a decent beach in the last 250 kilometres. Day 31. 62 kilometres today. Morning paddle into Tulibuck. Spent a couple of hours resting in the shade, listening to the cricket on the radio, in a small park by the edge of the river, under the shade of the veranda of a small white house. I was sitting on the veranda when a woman came over to chat. She was the daughter of Ben Bax, the last Tulibuck bridge keeper. A whistling kite's stare pierces wood duck flesh of drake and hen, their downy fleet of diving chicks offshore a river bend. 3 pelicans climb a cumulus sky, tracing a late afternoon spiral that is vanishing, vanishing. Down on the river, the whirlpools suck and wind, and we name the peril Coggles Bends. All their waves refract in the bitch and pups, and the wreck of the Little Ruby has broken up and been swept away. On a twisting night, a steamer skipper's trapped inside a vicious bite, keeping the Tulibuck bridgekeeper's children awake in the little square house by the river. 2 bedrooms only for the keeper and his wife, and 13 children listening for the beat of the paddle wheels, coming then going, coming then going, that finally send father into the night to work the winches that raise the bridge this one last time. Then from the steamer's upstream passage, a thump-thump receding, a thump-thump receding. Now the working river falls quiet, beneath the rattle of diesel pumps, each calling out its water right, answering the green desert dream. It too was cargo on the long sail south, as all night long the road trains hum their songs of haste upon a tar-sealed highway. The skippers must have seen it coming, talking softly across their billies of river water tea. The end's in sight, lad, the end's in sight. When rail and road bridged the run to market, 3 to 1, lad, 3 bloody river miles to every one. The skippers' voices fade, the old dreams die. Perhaps the offspring of the captain and crew, the bullocky and the bridgekeeper, will awake on a sun-bleached day, where ancestral streams flow again on the far side of our history. But for now, on a beach of steep white sand, remains the world unwinding. A place dimpled only with the soft imprints of waterbirds, and just offshore, a spray of blood and downy feathers settle on the current and drift away. In the end, the paddle steamer trade ran only from around 1850 to the early 1900s. They tried straightening the river, cutting channels through places where the meanders loop back on themselves, but then a big dry would leave the steamers trapped for months, years sometimes. The locks and weirs that ultimately made the river navigable came too late. Tractors replaced the old bullocky in the forest, and the paddle boats and barges were left to rot back into the river. Perhaps they were all racing each other as well as the river. In the end, they lost the race against the new technologies of road and rail. I'd been in my own race with the river and trying to gain a kind of technological advantage with my K1. But the price was hardship, and in the end, the race was lost. But the K1 and the river had one last parting gift. It's probably one of the few times I can say that I had a true flow experience. And, that flow state that people talk about. And I can remember paddling along in the K1, hammering away, and you just take it back a notch and you get to that point where you're just floating across the surface of the water. Your whole body's involved in the stroke. And I remember at one point it felt like the whole body of water in front of me was just falling. It was like I was going over a long, gentle waterfall. And I was just riding along with that real beat of the paddle and the whole body working in unison with the boat and the water. Really beautiful experience.